I vow to protect the memory of the fallen forever.
Today you'll learn about the incredible story of Derek Whitmore, a decorated tomb guard at Arlington National Cemetery, whose single moment of justice would expose one of the most shocking political scandals in recent American history. Get ready for a narrative full of unexpected twists and revelations that will leave you speechless. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. The morning of September 15th started like any other at Arlington National Cemetery. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as Derek Whitmore adjusted his pristine uniform, preparing for another day of solemn duty, guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier. At 26 years old, Derek had dedicated 3 years of his life to this sacred responsibility, following in the footsteps of his uncle, who had served in the Gulf War. Derek stood 6 feet tall, with the rigid posture that came from countless hours of training. His steel blue eyes held an intensity that spoke of unwavering dedication, while his clean-shaven face remained stoic under the weight of his ceremonial cap. Every morning he would polish his shoes until they gleamed like mirrors, ensuring that every detail of his appearance honored the fallen soldiers he protected. The tomb of the unknown soldier represented more than just a monument to Derek. It was a sacred trust, a promise to those who had given everything for their country. The 21 steps he took during each patrol, the precise turns, the unwavering vigilance, these weren't just ceremonial gestures. They were acts of reverence that connected him to generations of American heroes. As the morning progressed, visitors began arriving for the changing of the guard ceremony. Families with children, veterans wearing their service pins, and tourists from around the world gathered behind the chains that marked the respectful distance from the tomb. Derek could see the mixture of awe and solemnity in their faces as they witnessed the precision and dedication of the ceremony. Among the crowd, however, was someone who would soon disrupt this sacred space in the most shocking way imaginable. Vincent Caldwell, a 45-year-old lobbyist from Washington, D.C., stumbled slightly as he approached the viewing area. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, and the smell of alcohol hung around him like a cloud. Vincent had spent the previous night at an exclusive political fundraiser, where champagne and whiskey had flowed freely among the city's elite. Vincent's bloodshot eyes scanned the ceremony with obvious disinterest. To him, this was just another tourist attraction, another photo opportunity for his social media accounts. He pulled out his phone, completely ignoring the signs that clearly stated photography was prohibited during the ceremony. The flash went off repeatedly as he snapped pictures, drawing disapproving looks from other visitors. Derek noticed the disruption immediately. His trained eyes caught every detail: the man's unsteady gait, the inappropriate behavior, the complete lack of respect for the sacred space. But Derek remained at his post, maintaining the discipline that had been drilled into him through years of training. The ceremony must continue regardless of distractions. As the changing of the guard reached its most solemn moment, Vincent's phone rang loudly. Instead of silencing it, he answered the call, speaking in a voice that carried across the silent crowd. "Yeah, I'm at some military thing," he said loudly, causing several visitors to turn and stare in shock. "Just killing time before my meeting with Senator Blackwood." The mention of Senator Blackwood sent a chill through Derek. Everyone in Washington knew about the senator's recent push for military budget cuts, specifically targeting veteran benefits and memorial maintenance. The irony of this drunk man casually name-dropping the senator while desecrating the very memorial that honored fallen soldiers was not lost on Derek. Vincent's phone conversation grew louder and more inappropriate by the minute. "Tell Blackwood I've got those documents he wanted," he slurred into his phone, completely oblivious to the sacred ceremony taking place just feet away. "The ones about the Arlington funding cuts. We can finally push through that development project." Derek felt his jaw tighten beneath his stoic expression. Development project? At Arlington? The very thought was sacrilegious. This was hallowed ground where America's heroes rested in eternal peace. The idea that someone would even consider commercial development here was beyond comprehension. The ceremony concluded, and Derek began his measured walk back to his position. Each step was precise, calculated, a testament to the discipline that defined his service. But as he passed near the crowd, Vincent suddenly lurched forward, his alcohol-impaired judgment leading him to cross the sacred barrier. "Hey, soldier boy," Vincent called out, his voice thick with liquor and arrogance. "I need a picture with you for my Instagram." My followers love this military stuff. Derek stopped mid-stride, his training warring with his growing anger. The protocols were clear: maintain dignity, avoid confrontation, protect the sanctity of the tomb. But Vincent wasn't finished. He stumbled closer, his phone held high, the camera flash going off repeatedly. "Come on, don't be such a statue." Vincent laughed at his own joke, reaching out to grab Derek's arm. "Just one quick selfie, I'll tag you in it." The moment Vincent's hand made contact with Derek's uniform, something inside the guard snapped. Not because of the physical contact, but because of what this man represented. The corruption, the disrespect, the casual dismissal of everything Derek held sacred. "Sir, you need to step back behind the barrier," Derek said, his voice low and controlled, but carrying an edge that made several nearby visitors take notice. Vincent laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Relax, hero. I'm practically your boss anyway. You know how much money I funnel into this place through my connections." He leaned closer, his breath reeking of expensive whiskey. "Actually, scratch that. Soon there won't be much of this place left to fund." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. This wasn't just disrespect. This was a direct threat to everything he'd sworn to protect. The families of the fallen soldiers, the veterans who came here to pay their respects, the very memory of those who had given their lives for freedom. "What did you say?" Derek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vincent, emboldened by what he mistook for submission, stepped even closer. "You heard me, Tin Soldier. Senator Blackwood and I have big plans for this prime real estate. A luxury hotel, maybe a shopping complex. Think of the revenue potential." He gestured wildly with his phone, nearly striking Derek in the face. The crowd around them had grown silent, sensing the tension building between the two men. Children pressed closer to their parents, while veterans in the crowd began to move forward, their own anger rising at the drunk man's words. Derek remained perfectly still, his training keeping him rooted in place even as his mind raced. This man wasn't just a disrespectful tourist. He was part of a conspiracy to destroy Arlington National Cemetery. The sacred ground where Derek's own uncle might one day rest was under threat from the very people who should be protecting it. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step back," Derek said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced down much more dangerous situations than a drunk lobbyist. But Vincent was beyond reason. The alcohol, the power he wielded in Washington's corridors, and the arrogance that came from years of getting his way had created a perfect storm of stupidity. Instead of backing down, he raised his hand and, in front of dozens of witnesses, slapped Derek across the face. The sound echoed across the memorial like a gunshot. The slap reverberated through the sacred space like a thunderclap, followed by a silence so profound that even the distant traffic seemed to pause in respect for what had just occurred. Derek's head barely moved from the impact, but his eyes, those steel blue eyes that had witnessed countless ceremonies honoring the dead, now burned with a fury that seemed to emanate from the very souls of the fallen soldiers he protected. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Derek remained perfectly still. His training, his discipline, his unwavering commitment to protocol warred with something deeper, more primal. This wasn't just an assault on him personally, it was an attack on every principle he held sacred, every value that made his service meaningful. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Derek slowly turned his head back to face Vincent, who stood swaying slightly, a smug grin plastered across his flushed face. The lobbyist seemed to believe he had just demonstrated his power, his ability to humiliate even the most disciplined soldiers with impunity. "That's what I thought," Vincent slurred, his voice carrying across the memorial. "Are you military types are all the same, all show, no substance, just like this whole place. A bunch of dead guys nobody remembers anyway." Those words, those final, unforgivable words, shattered the last restraint holding Derek back. In one fluid motion, born from years of military training and fueled by righteous anger, Derek's right fist connected with Vincent's jaw with the precision of a surgical strike. The punch was devastating in its efficiency. Vincent's head snapped back, his expensive phone flying from his hand to shatter against the marble steps. His body followed, crumpling to the ground like a marionette with severed strings. The sound of his unconscious form hitting the pavement seemed to echo off every headstone in the cemetery, but Derek wasn't finished. As Vincent lay unconscious, his jacket had fallen open, revealing something that made Derek's blood run cold. Protruding from the inner pocket was a manila envelope marked with official government seals. Without hesitation, Derek reached down and extracted the documents, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. What he found inside would change everything. The first document was a detailed architectural plan for the Arlington Heritage Resort and Conference Center, a massive commercial development that would replace significant portions of the cemetery with luxury accommodations, shopping centers, and entertainment venues. The plans showed parking lots where Section 60 currently stood, the area where many Iraq and Afghanistan veterans were buried. The second document was even more damning: a signed agreement between Senator Blackwood, Vincent's lobbying firm, and Meridian Development Corporation, outlining a profit-sharing arrangement that would net the senator millions of dollars in consulting fees once the project was approved. But it was the third document that made Derek's hands tremble with rage. It was a forged environmental impact study, deliberately falsified to hide the fact that the development would disturb thousands of graves, including those in the older sections of the cemetery where Civil War veterans rested. As Derek read through the papers, the crowd around him began to stir. Several veterans had moved closer, their own military training allowing them to recognize the significance of what was happening. Among them was Major Elena Rodriguez, a retired Marine officer who had served 2 tours in Iraq before transitioning to civilian life as a military advocate. "Son," she said quietly, approaching Derek with the careful respect one soldier shows another, "what did you find?" Derek looked up from the documents, his face pale with the magnitude of what he had discovered. "Ma'am, they're planning to destroy Arlington, turn it into a shopping mall." The words spread through the crowd like wildfire. Phones came out, not for selfies this time, but to document the evidence. Veterans began calling their contacts in the media, while families of fallen soldiers wept openly at the thought of their loved ones' graves being desecrated for profit. Major Rodriguez took charge with the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "Everyone stay calm," she announced to the growing crowd. "We need to make sure this evidence gets to the right people." She turned to Derek, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Son, you just uncovered one of the biggest scandals in military history, but you also just ended your career as a tomb guard." Derek nodded, understanding the implications. He had broken protocol, struck a civilian, and would face serious consequences. But as he looked around at the faces of the veterans, the families, the ordinary Americans who had come to pay their respects, he knew he had made the right choice. Vincent began to stir, groaning as consciousness slowly returned. His jaw was already swelling, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. As his vision cleared and he saw the crowd surrounding him, the documents in Derek's hands and the phones recording everything, the color drained from his face. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "Senator Blackwood will destroy you, all of you. Destroy." Derek knelt down beside the fallen lobbyist, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just changed the course of history. "No, Mr. Caldwell, you have no idea what you've done. You just tried to sell the souls of America's heroes, and now everyone's going to know about it." Within minutes of the confrontation, the story began spreading across social media like wildfire. Videos of the punch, photos of the damning documents, and testimonials from outraged veterans flooded every platform. The hashtag #JustSaveArlington began trending nationally within the first hour, as Americans from coast to coast expressed their horror at the proposed desecration of the nation's most sacred military cemetery. Derek found himself at the center of a media storm, unlike anything he could have imagined. News crews arrived at Arlington within hours, their satellite trucks lining the roads outside the cemetery gates. Reporters clamored for interviews, while legal experts debated whether Derek's actions constituted justified defense of a national monument or simple assault. But the real earthquake came when investigative journalists began digging deeper into the documents Derek had exposed. What they found was a web of corruption that reached far beyond Senator Blackwood and Vincent Caldwell. The Arlington Development Project was just one piece of a larger scheme involving multiple government officials, defense contractors, and real estate developers. Amanda Foster, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the Washington Herald, was among the first to recognize the full scope of the scandal. She had been covering military affairs for over a decade and immediately understood the implications of what Derek had uncovered. "This isn't just about Arlington," she explained during a live television interview. "These documents show a systematic attempt to commercialize military memorials across the country. Gettysburg, Pearl Harbor, the Vietnam Memorial, they're all on the list. The revelations sent shockwaves through Congress. Within 24 hours of the incident, Senator Blackwood found himself facing calls for his resignation from both sides of the aisle. His office released a statement denying any wrongdoing, claiming the documents were fabricated, but the evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Derek faced his own reckoning. He was immediately suspended from duty pending a full investigation, his security clearance revoked, and his future with the military hanging in the balance. The Army's Criminal Investigation Division launched a formal inquiry into his actions, while the FBI began investigating the corruption allegations. But public opinion was firmly on Derek's side. Veterans organizations rallied to his defense, calling him a hero who had protected the honor of fallen soldiers. A legal defense fund established by the Veterans of Foreign Wars raised over $2 million in its first week, ensuring Derek would have the best legal representation available. The turning point came when Major Rodriguez, the retired Marine officer who had witnessed the entire incident, agreed to testify on Derek's behalf. Her testimony before a hastily convened Senate committee was devastating in its clarity and moral authority. "Senators," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of military service, "I have served this country in war and peace. I have buried friends, comforted widows, and folded flags for grieving mothers. What I witnessed at Arlington was not the actions of a rogue soldier, but the righteous anger of a guardian protecting sacred ground." She paused, her bronze star visible on her dress uniform, a reminder of her own sacrifice. Sergeant Whitmore did what any of us would have done when faced with someone attempting to desecrate the graves of our fallen brothers and sisters. He defended them the only way he could. The committee room erupted in applause, while Senator Blackwood, who had been scheduled to testify later that day, quietly slipped out a back exit. As the investigation continued, more evidence emerged of the conspiracy's scope. Emails between Vincent and Senator Blackwood revealed plans to fast-track the Arlington development by classifying it as a national security infrastructure project, bypassing normal environmental and historical preservation reviews. Phone records showed regular contact between Blackwood's office and Meridian Development Corporation, including calls made just hours before key votes on military appropriations bills. Bank records revealed a complex network of shell companies designed to hide the flow of money from developers to politicians. The scandal claimed its first major casualty when Senator Blackwood announced his resignation, citing personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. But investigators were far from finished. The FBI had identified at least 15 other members of Congress who had received payments from the conspiracy, along with dozens of Pentagon officials and defense contractors. For Derek, the vindication was bittersweet. While criminal charges against him were dropped, his military career was effectively over. The Army, while acknowledging his heroic actions, could not overlook the fact that he had struck a civilian while on duty. He was offered an honorable discharge with full benefits, which he accepted with dignity. But Derek's story was far from over. The documents he had exposed led to the largest military corruption investigation in decades, with prosecutions that would continue for years. More importantly, his actions had saved Arlington National Cemetery and dozens of other military memorials from commercial exploitation. As he prepared to leave Arlington for the final time, Derek stood once more before the tomb of the unknown soldier. The autumn air carried the same crisp chill as the morning when everything had changed, but now it felt different, cleaner somehow, as if the very atmosphere had been purified by the truth he had helped reveal. 6 months after the incident that would forever change his life, Derek Whitmore stood before a packed auditorium at Georgetown University, preparing to deliver a speech that would define his new mission. The young man who had once guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier in silent reverence now found himself at the center of a national movement to protect military heritage sites across America. "When I took my oath as a tomb guard," Derek began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had defined his military service, "I swore to protect the honor of those who gave their lives for our freedom. I never imagined that threat would come not from foreign enemies, but from those entrusted with our nation's leadership." The investigation that followed Derek's exposure of the Arlington conspiracy had revealed corruption on a scale that shocked even seasoned Washington observers. 21 members of Congress had been indicted, along with 57 Pentagon officials and dozens of defense contractors. The total amount of money involved exceeded $1 billion. Senator Blackwood, despite his resignation, had not escaped justice. Federal prosecutors had built an airtight case against him, using the documents Derek had recovered. He was currently serving an 18-year sentence in federal prison, his political career destroyed. Vincent Caldwell had fared even worse. His lobbying firm had been dissolved, his assets frozen, and he faced multiple felony charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and attempted destruction of federal property. But the real victory was the legislation that had emerged from the scandal. The Military Heritage Protection Act, signed into law just 3 months earlier, created unprecedented safeguards for military memorials and cemeteries. Derek had played a crucial role in drafting the legislation, working closely with veterans organizations. His transformation from silent guardian to vocal advocate had surprised many, but those who knew him understood that he was still protecting the same sacred trust. The men and women buried at Arlington didn't die, so their graves could become shopping centers, Derek continued. They died believing that future generations would remember their sacrifice, would honor their memory. For Derek personally, the journey had been transformative. He had lost his military career, but found a new calling as a guardian of military heritage. The Derek Whitmore Foundation, established with donations from grateful Americans, now worked to protect and preserve military memorials nationwide. As Derek concluded his speech, he returned to the theme that had defined his entire adult life: service to something greater than himself. "I may no longer stand guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier," he said, "but I will spend the rest of my life ensuring that the memory of our fallen heroes remains protected." The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. The punch that had ended Vincent Caldwell's consciousness had awakened something far more powerful: a nation's determination to protect the sacred trust between the living and the dead.